Hello and welcome to the channel. My name is Peter and this will be the 5th article in a series on the swimming rules, and in this one I'm going to attempt to explain how coaching and officiating relate to each other. So again, not much about rules in this particular article, and I'll apologise in advance if by the time I've edited this there are a lot of discontinuities, because I'm probably going to have to edit out more traffic noise than I've made actual usable video recording. Now, I always thought it was fairly straightforward because both of them basically refer to the same rules. The difference is that the coaches try to get the swimmers from start to finish in the shortest possible time within the rules, and the officials only become interested when someone goes outside the rules. You see, no one ever got disqualified for going slowly or for a scrappy stroke or a shoddy turn, as long as they didn't go outside the rules. The officials are there basically to protect the interests of all those swimmers who swam within the rules by issuing disqualifications to anyone who gets an unfair advantage by going outside the rules. Well, that's how it looked to me, but then after some questions I had to realise it doesn't look quite like that to the members, to the swimmers or their parents. What it looks like to them perhaps is they go to training sessions during the week where they're instructed by the coach, and then on the weekend they go to a swim meet where it appears to them that the technical officials descend from the clouds temporarily to walk up and down the sides and issue a few disqualifications. It might just seem like bad luck if you get disqualified, or maybe you think someone's picking on you. You see, they get taught to swim, and after that they just know what stroke they're doing. So it's a bit confusing to the swimmers when they're told that they've got an unfair advantage by going outside the rules. And not very many people seem to be very interested. It may be that I've confused the locals. I'm a bit unusual in that I hold qualifications for both coaching and officiating. And when I explain things, I cross over between the two subjects. When I'm doing a stand-up talk, I'll usually try to make it clear what I'm talking about, because if I've got the white hat on, they know I'm talking about rules, and if I've got the cap on, they know I'm talking about coaching subjects. Most people probably don't give it much thought. Maybe some think that there's a big pool of experts on swimming, and some of them do coaching and others of them do officiating. That's not the case. In practice they tend to develop quite separately from each other. The rules are one thing and coaching preferences are something else. But as a swimmer going to a training session, you probably won't know which is which unless the coach says so. I'll just illustrate that with an example. At a swim meet once, I disqualified a swimmer's race for a non-simultaneous touch at the turn. And his mother, who happened to be right there timekeeping nearby, said the coach told him one hand goes that way, the other hand goes that way. That's what he did. And I had to explain that the rules don't say anything about the orientation of the hands. What he was disqualified for was touching one hand after the other. You know? So this is how much people actually know about the difference. I'd have to say that most people are quite polite and well behaved, and so that's a very, very rare instance, but it really does illustrate how people don't quite understand the difference between swimming rules and coaching preferences. When I started out to try to do this article, I thought it would be quite straightforward, but it only gets murkier. You see, I'll illustrate something else. When I was doing a bit of assistant coaching there one day, the coach said to a butterfly swimmer, "Get your head down. You've got to get your head down before your arms get in the water at the front, or the referee will disqualify you." And it sounded a bit like it could be a rule. So I had to lean on the fence and think for a minute or so and think my way all the way through all the butterfly rules before I could explain that's not actually a rule. So he was probably only repeating what his coach had said to him. I don't know how long this has been going on. So coaches using the threat of the referee to get the swimmers to do what they'd prefer just adds a bit more complication to it. Another thing that I found that complicates it is you might assume that the technical committee at FINA, the world body, writes the rules. Well, they do, but me following up conspiracy theories, I don't think that's how it happens. I suspect that the coaches and the swimmers go to the technical officials and they say, "We've decided amongst ourselves what we want to be allowed to do." And then the technical officials attempt to put it into the form of a rule. I'll tell you why I'm fairly sure of this. Years ago, when for the first time one downward butterfly kick was allowed in breaststroke after the start of the turn, I found out that it had become a rule midweek, and on the weekend several of the breaststroke swimmers were actually doing it. Now, you don't learn a technique like that in a few days. The swimmers and the coaches must have known that that had been in the pipeline sometime back in the previous season, I'd suggest. And they've been practicing it since then and just waiting to hear that it had been allowed. I was not real pleased. I'd just escaped by about 3 days, and I reckon I don't need any other reasons to look silly. So that's just my little rant about that. Something else that's upside down when it comes to between coaching and rules. Once again, this has gone into a series about rules, but I'm afraid not very much about specific rules in this. The question was about whether a technical official could make recommendations about how swimmers could improve their technique. Now, I have to point out that when an official is actually walking the side of the pool, they are not evaluating swimmers' techniques. They are watching what is happening and comparing that with the rules. And it's a full-time job. There's probably a little bit of slack. Once you become experienced, you can sort of scan over things and muse a little bit about what you're seeing. But to evaluate a swimmer's technique in detail is the sort of thing that a coach does in a one-on-one exercise with a swimmer. It's not the sort of thing that a technical official can normally do while they're watching several lanes of swimmers in competition mode. The other thing is, as I said before, coaches and officials tend to develop separately, and I'll explain it like this. A coach has to know what the rules are so that the things that they teach the swimmers are only ever within the rules, so that they don't teach them anything that's outside the rules to use in a race. To achieve that, it is required that an accredited coach must also be familiar with the rules. Strangely enough, not really strange at all really, technical officials do not necessarily know anything about coaching. So while most people who are technical officials would know quite a lot about swimming, they don't necessarily know much about coaching. A few would, many would not, particularly when it comes to the finer points of better technique. Many would know or have some idea what a swimmer would need to do to get their technique within the rules if they were outside the rules, but not necessarily all. And probably not very many would see it as their job to explain that. In this part of the world, I know what it's like. When a club runs a swim meet, they rope in every swimmer around town who can swim a length, and their adherence to the rules can be pretty scrappy, because most of the best swimmers will attend training regularly under the instruction of a coach. Most of them only go to training occasionally. They'll often miss a lot of the instruction that they should have been there to listen to. And when a club scrapes together every last swimmer in town, you can be fairly sure that quite a lot of them don't go to training. So what I found myself doing when I had the opportunity to would be, if I'd just issued a disqualification, I would explain why, and then I would usually explain what they needed to do to get it right. And of course the other officials would often say to me, "You spend too much time talking to them," which is true, it's not really the official's job. But you see, when I'm officiating at a swim meet around here, I reckon I'd spend half my time with the coach's hat on. For that reason is that a lot of the swimmers just do not get enough instruction in the actual swimming rules. Now in 2017, most swim meets are run with electronic timing, and events go so quickly that there's no time to talk to swimmers at all. There's not even time to write infraction cards. What is meant to happen is that swimmers who have been exhibitioned out should ask an official after the conclusion of events to explain what the infraction was about.